Well, good to see everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I hope that there's been no effect from the typhoons there. Just praying for our brothers Luzon. I think there've been some areas there that have been affected. So as if we didn't need more things happening this year. It's incredible.
Good morning,
Thankfully,
Pastor Tim.
good morning. Good to see you, Pastor
Good
German.
morning. Yeah, thank
Good
you.
morning.
Thank you.
All right, let me pull up the assignment that's going to be due in a few days. And discuss that a little bit. And then, of course, just like we've been doing after I go through the assignment here in the format, then if you have any specific questions on your passage, I'll be happy to answer those. I just need to open one more file here, then I can get started with you guys. Let's see. There it is. Okay. All right. Well, we're getting down to near the end of the assignments here. We're on the 5th assignment, the primary matters. And that's really sort of the last few steps in the exegetical process and the first couple of steps in the expositional process. And so it's really all the final steps leading up to preparing your sermon document, as we discussed during our workshop. And as usual, I've put in references for you to review that will be helpful, hopefully, in getting you prepared for this assignment. We covered these particular steps in sessions 11, 12, and 13. So I've put those sessions there for you, and there are the links that you can grab. And then I've sent you the notes prior, so hopefully you have those. And so those 3 sessions cover all of the steps that we're going to be doing for this particular assignment. And then I've also mentioned the teacher's manual, the page numbers that cover these particular steps as well. So hopefully through all of those, if you have any questions, they can be answered there. But essentially, the remaining steps in the exegetical process are after you've done all the work that we've discussed up to this point, which is looking at the setting and the structure of your psalm, looking at the parallelism of the psalm, looking at the imagery and the figurative language of the psalm. Then studying from the last assignment is the diagram, the structural diagram, the word studies, and the textual observations. So we've done all that work. Now you're familiar enough with the passage, or you should be anyway, that you can consult resources and they'll be even of much more value to you. Now I put in your teacher's manual, I gave you several resources that you can look up. Also, too, I gave you some resources during the session 11, some links, some references online for studying poetry, studying the Psalms. So you can refer to those there. And in this step is basically when you access those resources. Okay, the commentaries, sermons, sometimes articles, Bible study, study Bibles, things like that, encyclopedias, all of those different resources that can give you insights into a particular passage. And now, because of all the study you've done yourself, you can have an intelligent conversation with those resources because you should be familiar with your passage, have thought through some of the different aspects of it, so that when a commentator or makes a particular statement, you'll be better able to assess if that statement makes sense, if it's consistent with the context of your passage, or sometimes they'll say some things you go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. But it won't be from a blank slate in your mind, because when we go to a resource at the beginning, our mind's a blank slate. If we haven't looked at our passage or studied our passage very much, then pretty much whatever a commentator says, we're just going to accept because it'll sound correct. But doing the process this way, where we wait till later on to consult resources, then we no longer have a blank slate in our mind. We filled it with a lot of our own study. And so we can compare what we read to what we've already studied from the passage. And believe me, I think that's a much more effective way to use resources. As well, too, as I mentioned before, when you've studied the passage, when you've looked at it, sometimes a resource will say something, you can go through resources more quickly because, a lot of the things in the resource, perhaps you already know, you've already studied. So those things you can read through quickly in that resource. But if you haven't studied the passage, you're going to read everything carefully because it's all new. And so, again, those are just a reminder of some of the reasons why it's best to wait before you bring resources into your study. And so all I've asked you to do is at this particular time is just identify the resources that you use. And I'll show you how I want you to do that when we go through the specific example. The next step after the consulting the resources is now, with all the information that you've studied, with the information that you have gleaned and read from others, from sermons maybe that you've listened to, you should now be at a point where you can take all of that information and identify the author's what, why, how. And again, that what, why, how is essentially a summary of what the author was saying, what's his main point, why did he say that main point, and how. All right. And for a poem, the what and the why will simply be the author's theme of a poem. Why did he write about that particular theme? And then the how is the stanzas, the outline that presents that particular theme. Okay. And that is the culmination. That's the final summary of all your exegetical work. You've drawn out of the passage what the author intended to say to his hearers. After you have that author's what, why, how, now you're ready to bridge to your sermon. And to do that, you need to identify the timeless truths. That's the next step. Again, remember, the timeless truths are those doctrinal truths that form the basis for what the author said to his audience. And those same truths would apply to us today. All right. And again, I mentioned here specifically where you can go back and look at the discussion either in the teacher's manual for Module 1 or Session 12 of our workshop. I talk about these timeless truths and we go through an example together. But essentially, it is those doctrinal truths which apply not only in the day and time and place of the passage as it was written, but also for today. Okay? So you're going to look again at your text and identify those particular truths. And then I'll show you one resource that's also very helpful for doing that. It's one that we covered in class, but I'll talk to you again about it in a moment. All right? So that's that particular step. Then after that, and this is what I want to really emphasize, men, it's a step that's often skipped, is the reflections, where you take everything now that you've studied, everything that you've read, you now have an idea of the author's main point, his what, why, how, and to just take all of that and now just focus on meditating on those things and how do they apply to you? What should the impact of this passage be in your life? What are some ways that you can apply the specific text in your situation? How has the passage affected your view of God? So these kinds of things. So spending at least 30 minutes or longer on that, looking again at your notes, looking at the passage. I use it as a time to be memorizing the passage if it's short enough. But it's just this idea of stopping before you rush to the sermon or putting the sermon together. It's the idea of stopping and just meditating on the things that that you have studied, because, you know, if it is the Word of God, and it is, it should be having an impact first on our souls before we seek to help others and apply it in other people's lives. If it's not having an effect on you, then that should be a big red flag, because, you know, it'd be like, what would be a good illustration? It'd be kind of like if you were taking some medication and it had no impact or help to you at all. You'd have to wonder, is something wrong with the medication? Now, in this sense, we would say nothing's wrong with the medication, nothing's wrong with the scripture, but there might be something wrong with the person who is taking it in. And so this step of reflection is meant to remind us that the Bible is living and active, and it's able to penetrate not only the souls and hearts of our hearers, but also our own soul as well. And so the preacher who is not being impacted by his own sermons is a dangerous preacher, because he can become a hypocrite. I mean, we're all hypocrites, let's face it, right? In some sense, none of us can perfectly apply everything that we're studying. I wish we could, right? Don't you? Wish you could. Once you study a passage, then you perfectly live it out for the rest of your life. Oh, that would be great. But if we're honest, we know that we struggle with it just as much at times as those in our congregation. And so that's why it's so important for us to take time and allow the Spirit to touch our own hearts with what we've been studying. So I want to just, again, remind us all of that and the importance of it. Just as our brother Ezra, he studied the law of the Lord and then practiced it and then taught it. And so we want to make sure that we follow in his footsteps in that regard. So I'll show a little example of that in a moment for this psalm. And then finally, once you've done that, and by the way, I'm not meaning to say that you only pray at this step, right? We should be praying all the way through the whole process. We should be praying when we start. We should be praying each step of the way. But this particular step of reflections is just meant to take extra time and a special focus time. Now that you've studied your passage and have an idea of what the author's saying, to just take that all in. And then also, too, ask God for insight into the passage, because we can still learn things even after we've done all of the study. There's more to learn. And I've had times where I'm actually preaching in the pulpit and an idea comes to me as I'm preaching that I hadn't thought about up until that point, where I did all this study, I put all this time in, and then it's not until sometimes when I'm in the pulpit that I go, oh, I never saw that before, even as I'm preaching. So we always can learn at any point in time. So we just need to keep praying the whole way through. Now, the fifth step I note here for this assignment is then, after all of that, is come up with your sermon concept and outline. That is the main point of your sermon, the focus point of your sermon, and then the outline for that sermon. Now, the outline should closely match the stanzas of the poem, but the way you might word each particular outline point, as well as the main point of the sermon, again, remember, we want to make it short, make it memorable, and make it consistent with the text. So again, that's just a quick review. These are the 5 parts, the 5 steps that are included in this assignment number 5 that you need to complete. All right, so before I go to the example from Psalm 99, I want to give you, do you guys have any general questions so far on the format of the assignment?
Pastor Tim, what
Yes,
is the
sir.
difference? What is the difference between a poem and a poetry?
The difference between a poem and
And a
poetry?
Yeah.
Well, poetry is sort of the general description of a style of writing. In the case of Hebrew poetry, it's a
Mm-mm.
general description of a writing that has parallelism, that has imagery, figurative language, shortness
Mm-mm.
of verses. So you'll see poetry all throughout the Bible, even in the
Yes.
New Testament.
New Testament.
Yeah. For example, in Colossians chapter 1, I think I showed you a couple of verses there where Paul implements a chiasm. In Philippians chapter 2, in the discussion of Christ, the incarnation, Paul uses some repetition and imagery there. In Ephesians chapter 1, Paul expresses truths there in the form of a chiasm, or not chiasm, a hymn of praise, psalm of praise. And then, of course, the Old Testament, there's many places where poetry is used. Now, a poem is a specifically focused, it uses poetry, but it's a specific self-contained idea that's expressed in the form of a poem with structure in itself. So,
Assured.
okay, so poetry would
Assured,
be the
yeah.
general description of the style of writing. A poem would be a self-contained series of verses that focus on a particular theme, written by a particular person in a particular time.
Thank you, Pastor
Okay.
Tim. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. That would be kind of like the difference between saying the narrative genre versus a story. You know, a story applies narrative principles, but it's a self-contained, it's self-contained plot, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Pastor Tim, it can be possible in our sermon outline how the points can be interchanged. The first point the third point that I need to want to put in the second point, and the second point put in the, or
Yeah,
we just follow the track of the author, the book of the.
Yeah, my general opinion is you should try to follow the author's flow of thought, because his is the inspired writing. So if the Holy Spirit has determined a certain order, I would generally just follow that. I don't think it would be wrong not to, as long as you're being accurate in each point. If you feel like your particular congregation that you really want to emphasize or spend more time on the third point, so you say, you know what, I'm going to move that to the beginning because I really want to make sure I cover this point thoroughly. That would be, there's nothing wrong with doing that at all if you think that would be best. I tend to try to follow the author's sequence there. So that the short answer would be that's your decision, but probably don't. I would say follow the author more often than not. That's safer. Does that help? Did I answer it, or do you have any response to that or thought about that?
That okay, Pastor Tim. That's help. That give me a general idea also.
Yeah. Now, if you're dealing with it more topically, like some psalms may not really have a clear structure, and you want to sort of, like, for example, or let's say you're teaching out of Proverbs and you're talking about the subject of speech, from Proverbs chapter 17. or 18, I think it is. There you're going to be skipping around because it's not a self-contained poem. It's just a series of single verse statements. So in that case, there isn't really a clear structure. So you can put it together however you feel best. But if you have a specific psalm or a self-contained poem, I think it's better to follow the outline of the author.
In epistle, Pastor Tim.
In an epistle, yeah, I would say same thing, because normally in an epistle, the author's building his argument. And so you want to follow his thought process, his flow of thought as best you can. Again, I'm not saying that's a rule or that you'd be sinning if you don't. I just say that, to me, I feel that's a better approach. Someone else had a question or a comment?
Pastor Tim, aside from poetry, it is good and helpful for us to add some poem in the writings of the psalm. It is good that we also add poem aside from poetry.
I'm not following you. What do you mean?
I mean, aside from poetry, can we add poem to the idea? Examples in the book of Psalms. Aside from poetry, can we add poem writings as well?
Can you add poem writings?
Yeah.
In the Psalms?
Yeah.
Yeah, help me out. I'm not clear on the question. I'm sorry. It's late at night here, so maybe can you explain it a little differently so maybe I can understand?
Tabang Will Edward Tabang.
What was it, Brother Pastor Germs?
Kanang aside ba sa poetry nga kuan writings, pwede ba ta maka-add og poem sa atong gihimo?
As a reflection?
Yeah.
Okay. What Pastor German is asking is, as part of the reflection, can we add our personal poetry in reference to our reflection, basically?
Oh, to the reflection. Okay, that's the part
to the reflection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, I knew a pastor actually that would do that he would write parts of the poem in contemporary style, just to sort of, he took a theme from the poem and sort of wrote a modern version, not interpreting the poem. It wasn't a translation, but it was kind of taking the idea from the psalm and sort of writing his own. That's what people do who write music, Christian music. They're basically doing that, right? They're taking some biblical principle and writing a poem that you sing. So I think that's a really creative way to reflect on the psalm. So let's say you're looking at a particular psalm like Psalm 51, which focuses on repentant heart, and maybe you have some personal experience with a sin in your life, and you sort of take the style of David and write your own kind of Psalm 51. That can be very impactful. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Pastor Tim. Thank you.
I would just be careful if you share that in the congregation that you're clear that this is not an interpretation of the passage, but maybe just something that impacted you and prompted you to write a poem yourself. If you choose to share it in your sermon, you don't have to. But my wife likes to do that. She'll write some very good poems that based on a passage of scripture. And that's just a way that she's very creative. So it's a way for her to express that creativity in a very helpful way. So good idea. Sorry that I did not understand.
It's okay, Pastor Tim. It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, good. Great idea. Any other thoughts or reflections, questions before we go to the example? Welcome, Pastor Rex. Welcome, Brother Edwin. Good to see you.
Morning, Pastor Ted.
Good morning, Pastor Tim.
Good morning. Okay. Let's go to the example then from Psalm 99. And again, the details of this, you can look to sessions 11 through 13 if you want to review. I just basically took the material there and summarized it, compiled it into the format here for this assignment. For the consulting resources, you don't need to put all the information you read together. I just want to see the resources that you used. And so for me, these are the resources that I used when I studied Psalm 99. And make sure too, I would put the specific pages that you consulted if it was had page numbers. If not, if it's just a document like this one, put that down. Okay, and it can be stuff online, or in these cases, these were actual books that I used. These are sermons that I listened to for this psalm. So you need to do this for a couple reasons. One, you should be consulting resources at this point. We don't know everything, and it's helpful to learn from others at the right time in the process. So one, we should be looking at resources for that reason. Two, we should be noting those resources in order to make sure we give credit to them whenever we perhaps reference something that was said in a resource or an idea that was borrowed from a resource. You know, there have been times where maybe you put together an outline and you look at a resource and you go, you know, that's actually a better outline. I really like that outline. And so it's perfectly okay to borrow that outline, but you know what? You need to give credit to the person that put that outline together. Because one, it's it came from them, not from you. And two, we don't want to present anything that we didn't do as if we did it. That's not being honest. So I know ultimately, you know, any truth's going to come from the Spirit. There, you know, what's the saying that preachers are just thieves stealing from other thieves? You know, that there's an element of truth to that, but I think it's important just to have integrity ourselves, that if we use something from someone else, that's perfectly fine to do. Just, you know, put a footnote or a reference in your sermon, and you know, whether you choose to say it in the sermon or not, that's up to you. I generally do. Just, you know, I think it's good practice. So we want to have integrity in that. So that's another reason. You want to make sure you note the resources you use, so you know, don't forget where you got a certain comment from. And then two, I say put the page numbers down if you can, because then there are many times you might want to go back to that resource. Let's say that you are preaching this sermon later, a couple years later, and you want to just sort of refresh your thoughts a little bit. If you know the specific pages that you referenced, that can help make it easier when you go back to review. Or if someone else asks you, and I've had this happen to me in sermons where they say, you know, Pastor, you quoted from somebody about this. Where did you get that quote? I'd really like to read what that person said. Well, then you can say, well, I got it from this particular book, etc. So that way it'll be helpful for others in your congregation. And one reason too that I like to mention resources that I use in my sermons is because I want people to be reading good resources as well, right? People are going to be looking on the internet. They're going to be doing searches too. So why not guide them a little bit and mention specific scholars or you know, preachers that specific names, so that, you know, maybe then that'd be something they can look to or listen to later. So they can it can be a way for you to sort of let them know what are good books or good people to look to. All right. Now, you have to be careful then too, because once in a while, if you use a resource from somebody that's not very good, but maybe they say something that's helpful, you may not want to share that particular person because then people in your congregation might start following them or thinking that they're a good person to listen to, and they're not. So be wise with that. But for this particular step in your assignment, just note the resources that you used and be as specific as you can. If you want to include the publisher, that's fine too. I didn't in this particular case, but you can do that as well. Okay. So these are the ones I use for Psalm 99 in my study of the Psalm. Do you guys have anybody have any questions or input or comments on this particular step?
Pastor Tim,
Yes, sir.
how do we know a good book or a good resources? I myself, I confess that I do not know many of them. So where can I find a good book or a good resources?
Okay, good, great question. And you also have the added challenge of, most of it needs to be online, right? It's hard to get a bunch of books as well. Well, for one, I mean, I've given you several in the class, and you can even look here at the resources I used. Those are some that are helpful to use. Sometimes if you're looking at other resources, maybe you do a search online, you're going to want to investigate that author as well and see where did he go to school, what denomination is he a part of, what other books has he written, or you might need to do a little exploration, or maybe ask some other pastors that you trust. Pastor Mel is well read, so I would check with him. You can, of course, you're always welcome to ask me or some of the other guys from TEA. I have that happen a lot. A lot of people in my church, they'll write me and say, I'm studying the book of First Timothy. Do you have any good commentaries that I should consider? So those are some ways. There is a book called, I think it's called Commentaries for Biblical Expositors by James Roskup. It might be in the library at Living Word Banawa, but he actually goes through all these commentaries and gives summaries of them. Another resource is, I think it's great. Is it greatcommentaries.com? I think that's it. Let me look it up real quick. That one's been a helpful resource, generally speaking. I'm just going to confirm real quick if that's the right website. Commentaries. Oh, my internet's slow. I also, too, Pastor Rex, in the notes, I put a pretty long list of resources for Psalms. I put some online resources and then also some commentaries there. Some of them are listed here, but you can also go on the previous workshop, I think in session 11.
So it's in the teacher's manual, Pastor Tim?
There should be some there as well, yes. Page 45 and 46.
Pastor Tim, with eSword, are the commentaries there okay for everything in the commentaries in the eSword? Are they good?
I'm not familiar enough with the resources there. I know some that I've seen are good, but I haven't looked at all of them. So I'd probably want to say I've seen some good ones there. I can't speak for all of them. It's like Logos. Logos has a lot of resources, and some of them are excellent, but some of them are liberal scholars. And so they include them because there's maybe a really smart professor or something, but they might be liberal, or in some cases they're not even Christians.
Okay.
So
William Barclay, Pastor Tim, sa liberal.
yeah. I generally, he's got some good insights at times, but I usually don't recommend him because there are some more liberal views that he has. But he has some good things, it's not all bad. But I think for pastors, it's probably okay. But for people in the congregation, I would not recommend. And so that's the thing. When people ask me, what's a good commentary for the Gospel of John, I won't mention Barclay. Even if I used him, I won't tell people that because I wouldn't want to expose them to some of the things that he says.
Albert Barnes, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, he's
is
an
he
older.
okay?
He's an older
Yeah.
one. Generally, I think he's okay. Again, I haven't
And so
studied all
with
of him extensively, so.
John Gill.
John Gill, another, he's a much older
Yeah,
writer,
yeah, I know.
but he's
But he's
good.
a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I've
helpful.
read his work.
Calvin is helpful. You can get a lot of stuff from him online. For the Psalms, I think Treasury of David is a excellent resource
Okay.
because not only do you have Spurgeon's notes, but also he gleans from commentators and preachers from his day. And so he's
So for the
actually,
Psalms,
Treasury of David, and that's online. See there, there's the
I have
website you can use.
I have it in research, Pastor
Yeah.
Tim.
Yeah, I would say that's a very helpful resource, Treasury of David. The Kyle and Delich is also very helpful, but I don't know if you can access that online. Dr. Barrick's very helpful, but he doesn't have a lot of detail. Bible.org usually has a good amount of detail. And then I didn't look at it, but the ESV Study Bible is also very helpful. And they have a lot of resources there. I didn't use it for this particular psalm. And then, of course,
Pastor Tim,
yeah.
Pastor Tim, I'm really fond with using eSword because that's convenient for me because it's in my tab.
Yeah.
How do I acknowledge them? eSword and then like Treasures of David. There's no pages in it in the eSword material.
Yeah, if you don't have page numbers, then just list
Just
the
the name.
author, list
Okay.
the title of the work, and then
Okay.
if it's
Maybe.
something from then list the psalm that you're referring to. Because sometimes I find good stuff in other psalms, like maybe you're doing a word study, and the same word is used in Psalm 92, and so the commentary for that word in Psalm 92 is helpful. So I would just put like that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get.
Sometimes I refer to other psalms when I study, and so that's why I say just be as specific as you can. If there's no page number, that's fine. But if it, just note who wrote it, title, and what particular psalm you were looking at.
Because much of the online resources, Pastor Tim, does not have pages on it.
Correct. But some do, like this one, because it's a PDF.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That one's a PDF, okay. So it does have a...
Yeah, if it's in PDF, but if not, probably there's no pages.
Yeah, like here. That's the case here. It was just Psalm 99. It was several pages, so I just put as much as I could there.
That's all.
Okay.
Pastor Tim, is William MacDonald is a good one to resource. William MacDonald.
William MacDonald?
Yeah.
Makes me hungry. It's a good resource of burgers and chicken.
How about Will Edward?
Yeah.
Not yet. Hope to get there.
I am not familiar. Where did you hear about him?
My sister-in-law from US sent me a sort of commentary, the Believer's Commentary
By William MacDonald.
by William MacDonald, not well Edward Belda.
Not Edward.
Belda.
Okay. Okay.
William MacDonald, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him. Again, I would look, for these guys too, just you want to look at their background. Where did they study? Was it a seminary, secular university? And secular university is not necessarily bad, but if all of his degrees are from a secular university, you might want to pay attention to that. What denomination does he represent? Basically you want to know, can you find out his testimony? You want to make sure the guy's a Christian. Those would be some things just like a preacher, right? If you you don't just listen to any preacher and say, you want to have discernment. And so you want to know, is this guy a Christian? Is he a liberal in his thinking? Does he believe the Bible is inerrant? What is his view of the gospel? Some of these questions you might not be able to answer, but these are going to tell you, if you can find answers to them, it'll tell you a lot about the person.
Thank you, Pastor Ken.
Okay, and like I said, you can always, there's other people, maybe older pastors who you can ask as well. But yeah, sorry, I'm not familiar with William MacDonald. It's not coming to my mind. Okay, so that's the resources, and again, in that step, really, it should be, what you're doing is, one, confirming your own conclusions. So does this resource say anything that would contradict what you came up with? That's why we want to use good resources. So confirm your own conclusions is help you think about illustrations, perhaps applications. Sometimes a resource will do that. Maybe help you think of other insights that you didn't come up with on your own. Sometimes they'll mention some things, you go, oh, I never thought about that. But having studied this psalm, I think that makes sense. That's a good insight. So those are some things to use resources for. Okay. And then sometimes they will, more precise, more memorable ways to express a point. Maybe they summarize a particular point or stanza in a better way. So that can be a helpful. Like I said, there have been times I've looked at a resource and said, wow, they put together the stanza points, in a much better way than I did. So I can learn from that. Okay. All right. Now the next step in the assignment is, after you've listed the resources that you've used, is to come up with, at this point, what is the author's what, why, and how. For Psalm 99, after our study in the class, I think this is in session 11 as well, the concluding idea or main topic of Psalm 99 was the call to exalt and worship God. And then I just put a footnote. This is the primary command of the psalm. It's repeated 3 times. And then the why, so the what is exalt and worship God from the psalm. The why is because he's holy. And again, it's in the refrain in the psalm. So that's the author's what and why. And then the how is represented in the 3 stanzas. The first one focusing on God's greatness, the second on his justice, and the third on his mercy. And so this forms what I believe, after all the study, is the author's what, the author's why, and the author's how. This isn't my sermon. This is from the author's point of view. So that's why I don't have, I just basically state it in a straightforward way. There's no cute acronyms or anything like that at this point. I'm just saying, what is the author's main point? Why did he express that main point? And what's the structure or the outline from his psalm? Okay. And so you can express it in more words if you want. I just did a shorter version, but it's okay if you have a longer sentence. It's no problem. But this is the key right here, getting to this point. Because remember what we talked about at the very beginning. Before we can say what a passage means to our hearers, we need to know what it meant from the original author. And so this step is summarizing what the original author meant, what he was saying to his audience, to his hearers. All right, so we have to get that right before we can go to the next step of teaching it to our hearers. So for this step in your assignment, I just want you to write out the what, why, how, just like I did here, but do it for your passage, okay? So you don't need a lot of notes. You don't need a lot of explanation. This is more of the summary as you put everything together, okay? Any questions on this, or comments, or questions specific to your particular passage?
Pastor Tim,
Yes.
the point, diba, it's for every stanza in Psalm. Every stanza.
Which
So they can create a point, but how?
Yeah, it's
in our Psalm 119, there's only 1 stanza.
yes.
So how can we make for me, I make 3 points in every. Can we do that, or make it in a general form, and I will not tell the points because there's only 1 stanza.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to consider. We talked about last week, sometimes you'll see some substructure. So yes, in your particular case, it's 1 stanza of 8 verses. But there might be like a substructure, meaning he may focus on one particular idea in one part of the stanza and another idea in another part. For example, which were you, verses 9 to 16?
Yes, 9 to 16.
Yeah, yours, it's a little harder to see. I think in verses 25 to 32, there looks to be maybe 2, and Pastor Rex can confirm that, but I think looks like maybe 2, a substructure of the first 4 verses. Psalm 119, it's harder to see, so there you might want to just identify maybe the 2 or 3 ideas that are expressed as part of the whole. The whole stanza should represent 1 idea.
Yes.
And then maybe in that there's 2 or 3 supporting.
Substructure.
Yeah, but it may be like verses 9, 11, and 13 in one point, and then verses 12 and 14 and 16 in another point, or something like that.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying earlier about like Psalm 51. I didn't see a clear structure from that psalm, and so what I did was there was like 3 or 4 themes.
Verses. Themes.
so then I grabbed, you know, one theme was that we need to take ownership for our own sin. And so I pulled the verses that expressed that idea. Another theme was to cry out for God's mercy. Another theme in Psalm 51 is, you know, this idea of, you know, what genuine repentance looks like in our actions. And so I just took what I saw as sort of repeated ideas and then collected the verses together, almost in a topical way, actually. So you may need to do that for your section. The other psalms are self-contained psalms. So all the other psalms, you guys are going to have a structure. But Psalm 119, I found a little structure there myself, I think, but it might be forced. Where I think the first 3 verses, I saw a focus, and then the next 5 verses, I saw another focus, and then the last 2 verses I saw. So I saw 3 ideas there from that psalm, from that stanza. But hopefully that helps. Yeah, you had a little
Yes.
more difficult assignment. So,
Plus points,
Yeah,
plus
you have to
points.
cry.
plus points. Well, I just, you know, I give those to people you know, pastors I expect or, you know, capable of handling the more challenging texts. So,
Pastor Tim,
yeah.
Pastor
That's
Tim,
a
what about
compliment, my friend.
the parallelism of ambot formal? How can we integrate to our passage that we can connect?
Yeah, that's
Can we set aside, or can we set aside that thing, or just we need to force to connect?
well, even if there's no parallelism, there's still a point being made by the psalmist or the poet, right? So sometimes the structural diagram can help to see how that verse fits with the other verses.
Yes.
But he's still making a point there. It's just parallelism. You know, even if he doesn't use parallelism, he's still expressing an idea that fits with what's around it. So, yeah, don't ignore it, but you know, just see what is he saying within that verse, and how does it connect to the other verses around it. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Tim.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions on this what, why, how from your passage? Okay. Silence means no questions or you're bored. So we'll just, either way, we'll move on. Okay. Now the third step, and again, I covered this, I think, in session 12 of our workshop together. But this step is to take a look at the passage, sort of step back from the passage for a moment, and just identify key doctrines, timeless truths that you see in the passage. All right. And this can be not just the main points, but sometimes even just a single statement or something like that. So here's what I had put together from Psalm 99. Now, again, this is not the outline of the psalm. It's not the structure of the psalm. It's just particular timeless truths that apply in any place, for any people, at any time, in any culture. And so, for example, the first verse, you know, it talked about, you know, Yahweh's being exalted. And so that was a timeless truth. He's exalted all the time, every place, over every people. He's always worthy of praise. Because God is holy, he's worthy to be exalted. That's not just true for the people in the day the psalm was written. That's true today. And it's true not just in the United States, also it's true in the Philippines. It's true in Israel. It's true in Pakistan, all right? So these are truths that apply to everyone at every time, in every place, all right? Yahweh forgives sin. That's not just one specific place or people. That's true for everybody. He forgives sin. He punishes the evil. So these are just doctrinal truths that you see from the passage. And so I also consulted, and this is where this book can be helpful, is the Biblical Doctrines book. If you go to the back, the scripture index, and we went through this in the workshop, and look up your particular passage. In my case, it was Psalm 99. And I noted there were several pages that referenced that passage in the Biblical Doctrines book. And so sometimes a particular timeless truth you can find by doing this, where look at the index for your psalm and then look up the page number that they mention. And I found a few helpful things. In fact, I wrote them here. There's a discussion on God's holiness, some references to the priority of the church to exalt and worship God. Those are some helpful thoughts. And then also, sometimes you'll see a timeless truth that you can put up here that they identify. Okay? So that's a good resource to use for this step. And then what I do is just summarize. In this case, most of these have to do with the character of God. He's sovereign, he's worthy of praise, he's holy, he forgives. These are related to God's character, and those don't change. And that's why I know they're timeless truths, because God doesn't change. All right, so and you'll find this in the Psalms in particular. Often there's a focus on God and on man. All right, and so those kinds of things never change. All right, now the Psalmist Circumstances, those would be particular to his time, but what he says about God and what he says about people and even just how he responds. Maybe he's feeling despair, that's a typical response when someone's feeling attacked. So those kinds of things. So just list, there could be 3 or 4, there could be 20 from your passage, all right? But put the ones down that you see, and then make sure to put a verse where you see that particular timeless truth. Okay? So for this part, do your own study and then look up in Biblical Doctrines your passage, your psalm, to see if there's anything there that they have to say about it. Okay? Any questions on this or comments?
No, Pastor Tim.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. And remember, these are the timeless truths that are the bridge between the author's day and our day, his audience and our audience. Okay? And then it's after this step where now that you've identified the authors, what, why, how, you've identified timeless truths that are within the passage. Now is the step where I suggest where you need to spend some time in reflection and then just write like just a summary paragraph for your assignment, like I did here. If you want to write more, you're welcome to do that, but at least sort of summarize some key parts of how you spent that time. And so that's what I did here. I just noted part of the time I used to memorize the psalm and then think about how it applies to me. I mentioned a few things that I thought about here. Again, I don't put everything down, but just some key thoughts that came to my mind, things that I prayed. So just do that. Just put a paragraph or 2 down from your time of reflection. Okay? And there's no specific things I'm looking for there at all. It's just however you spend that time focused on the passage and yourself. But also too, notice I also used that time, I prayed that God would help me preach the passage with conviction, that he'd move the hearts of the hearers. And again, I prayed more things, but this was just sort of a summary. Okay? So just do that here. I think it's pretty straightforward, but does anybody have any questions or thoughts on this particular step? I really would encourage you men to work at memorizing part, if not all of your psalm. I think that's very beneficial not only to remembering things as you preach, but really to even as Psalm 119 says, right? Your word I've treasured in my heart that I might not sin against you. And I think that speaks to the importance of memorizing, and so that you can meditate upon it. Okay, so that's reflections. And then finally, and this is a key step, is to take everything now and identify a succinct, accurate, clear statement of the main point of the sermon. That's the sermon concept. And I just boiled mine down to do homage to the holy, or you could say honor the holy, or you could say exalt God. I just tried to find something that I hope would be memorable. And then I came up with a sort of the 3 points. Again, I followed the outline, the stanzas in the poem, and I just used some synonyms. Extol God for his majestic holiness, exalt God for his moral holiness, esteem God for his merciful holiness. And notice holiness is in each of these stanzas, and there's a different kind of holiness that is the focus. And then all of them call for a response. Okay, and so this psalm was kind of easy to go from the author's what, why, how to the sermon concept, because within the psalm, it's a directed psalm already. He's commanding the hearers to respond in a certain way, and that's a timeless response. So God should be exalted back then, and in the same way, he should be exalted by his people today. So actually, going from my author's what, why, how to my sermon concept and outline was pretty straightforward. I just tried to make it a little more memorable in how I did it. But that's it. And this is key. Really spend some time on it, because from this is your sermon document. And if this is accurate, if you're correct here, then that's going to be key as you put the sermon together. You've got the main thoughts already written down. Now it's just filling it out with explanation, right? The point, proof, picture, plan, problem. That'll go for each of these steps. You'll state your point, explain it, show from the passage the meaning of that particular point, illustrate it, identify some ways to apply it. And then if there's any problem or question or doctrinal issue that you think would be helpful to discuss from that point, you would bring it in there as well. Okay? So all of this, really, these steps prior lead up to this last step to prepare you for it. And then from this last step, you can launch into your sermon document, which will be the next assignment. Okay, so this is an important step. Don't just take a couple minutes on this. Really give it some prayer, give it some thought. Come up with a good main point that will be memorable, that's clear, of course, that's accurate, and that'll really help guide the rest of your process in preparing the message. All right, any questions on that? Comments? Specific questions on your passage?
Pastor Tim,
Yes, sir.
what's the difference between the how in the what, why, how steps, and then in this sermon outline?
Well, if we compare, let me just copy mine.
Really, there's this similarity in that.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying for this psalm, I didn't really need to change much, because these particular points are timeless. Sorry, these particular points from the what, why, how, the how points are timeless.
Yeah.
So really, I just tried to make it a little more memorable and parallel in idea. So I could have taken almost the author's outline and used that.
What, why, how?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good.
Really, it's really this similar. They have this similar what?
Yeah, because
So
these are
in our case, can it sometimes differ really that much? the sermon outline and then the how?
It
Does it necessarily like it has a similarity somehow, or can it really be a different item?
They're usually, I mean, they're fairly similar. Again, if your author's what, why, how, if they're timeless truths, then they're going to apply to us today. But like Psalm 13, the focus there is David's lament. And so the author's what, why, how will be David's lament about, his about feeling abandoned by God. That might be verses 1 to 3, and I can't remember the verse numbers exactly. And David feels like dying, verse 4. Verse 5 and 6, David tells himself how to come out of his depression. Something like that, might be the author's what, why, how. Okay, that's his how. Okay, but you're not going to preach about David. You're going to preach to your hearers. So you're going to take the principles from this psalm, and come up with something like, 2 responses that will deliver you from depression, or 3 responses. Cry out to God for help. Pray fervently, something like that, and then preach truth to yourself. I don't know, something like that. This is just a sort of an example. Whoever has Psalm 13, I mean, don't copy this exactly, all right? But it's just a rough idea. So you'll move from the author's focus to the principles he is applying, he's using, and then you're going to do that for you're going to direct it towards your audience, okay? The psalmist is directing it to his audience. And so it's going to be more focused on the author and the recipients of the psalm. But you want to make it more directed towards your hearers. So it's applying how the psalmist approached his particular issue. Now in Psalm 99, because it's an instruction, it's a wisdom psalm, remember? So it's instructional by nature, so it's directed to the hearers by nature. And because it's timeless in what the psalm says, it was pretty easy to go from the author's what, why, how to the sermon, and they're pretty similar. All right.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
So hopefully that helps.
Pastor Tim, I have a specific question. Actually,
Sure.
With regard to my what, why, how, and in relation to my sermon concept and outline. Is it okay if I share a screen so that I can ask guidelines from you?
Yeah, sure. All right, go ahead.
Wait.
Pressure's on. We're all waiting.
Yeah.
Now you know how I feel.
Wait, let me just enlarge it. I will share my screen. Here you go. There. Basically. This is my what, why, and how based on my assignment, Psalms 100, humble gratitude, quite No, a bit. The appropriate worship of God. Why? Because He is the sovereign God, creator, and loving Father, as referenced in verses 3 and 5. How? Appropriate attitude toward God in verse 1. You shout, you declare your thanksgiving for who and what God has done as an appropriate response to the Lord in verses 2, 3, line 1, and verse 4. And evidence of the Lord's greatness in verses 3, lines 2 and 3, and ultimately in verse 5. So with regard to the sermon concept, the appropriate response to the Lord. And then the sermon outline is basically 3, attitude of gratefulness, and then appropriate and constant response to the Lord based on verses 2 to 4. Action is service, serve the Lord with gladness. Attitude, come before Him with joyful singing. And adherence, to know the Lord, to study, meditate, remember what He has done, because He has made us. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. And then experience and practice our obedience and adherence to God, based on you enter His gates with thanksgiving and His courts with praise. Of course, I just shortened it. And then to give thanks to Him and to bless His name. And finally, all of this is because of the attribute of the Lord, which is also a timeless truth, should be a constant reminder to worship God, as a constant reminder to thank God, and a constant reminder to obey God. Are these related? Is my sermon concept and outline related to my what, why, how, or is it like far and in between?
Yeah, I would say
Other.
you want to your sermon concept and outline needs to be more directed. I mean, notice from your psalm, it's full of imperatives, right?
Yes.
Shout, serve, come, know, enter, give, bless, right?
Yes.
Your sermon outline should reflect that. They should be directed.
Okay.
So
So
instead of
okay,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, please. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Instead of saying attitude of gratefulness, you should be saying, be grateful. Instead of
Okay.
appropriate and constant response, summarize that into a directed command. Worship God in song, or something like that. Because serve is the idea of worship, right? Come before Him is the idea of worship. So I might say, joyfully worship the Creator, right? Because that's sort of what He says there. You still with me?
Yes. So
that,
basically, it's specifically directive
yes.
because it's based on the imperatives of the psalm.
Yeah.
Okay. So because it says, okay, so be grateful to God as referenced in verse 1 in shouting, and then worship God in with joy and gladness, and then so
Because,
it's like expressed that way, directive. Yes.
yeah, and I would say, I mean, to me, I kind of see sort of 2 stanzas there, verses 1 to 3, verses 4 to 5.
Yes.
Because verses 1 and 2 give the commands, and verse 3 sort of gives the reason. And then verse 4 gives some commands, and verse 5 gives
Specific
the reason.
command. Yes.
So you might want to consider that, and then incorporate both the command and the reason within your outline point.
So even if like it interchanges, or even if the pattern is A B, I can consolidate all the A's and then consolidate all the B's.
You could do it that way.
It can be done that way. Okay.
In fact, I think when I preached it, I did it that way. I identified both stanzas, but then I told people about the pattern, and so I said, first I want to focus on the commands, and then second on the reasons. So you could do that.
So then I can, if I would use that as an example, I can base my sermon content in that way.
Yeah.
Like instruction in imperative, imperative, and then reason, reason. Because the imperatives are really specific. The first one is a bit general, but the second one is specific.
Yeah.
It's more specific than the first one. But then the reasons are, of course, similar and synonymous.
Yes, and remembering the occasion for this psalm, right? This was it says a psalm for
Worship.
things.
Yeah, during a worship celebration or something. Yeah, temple worship.
Yes, but specific to when you come with a thank offering, right? And the title,
Yes.
the title
Yes.
says a psalm for the thank offering. So it's really a specific background context here, setting for this, which is the person coming to worship with a thank offering. How should that person enter into the temple, essentially, right? Because it talks about his gates, his courts. So this is specific to a person coming to the temple in worship
And bringing
in
his
order
offering.
to bring a thank offering to God. So so really, yeah, the overall theme is the idea of gratitude. That would be my summary point. So instead of saying appropriate response to the Lord, it really needs to be something like, having to do with this idea of gratitude, having to do with the idea of worship, joyful worship. All that should be incorporated in your
Outline.
your sermon concept. Then
Sermon.
your outline
Okay.
will break it down. Your outline is
okay.
Your outline is structured. You can either preach it 2 stanzas, verses 1 to 3 is one point, verses 4 and 5 is the other. Or in this case, I think Kent asked this question before. This might be an example where it would be okay to split up a little bit because you see a pattern here in each stanza.
Okay.
It's the same pattern. Command, verses 1 and 2, commands. Verse 3, reason. Verse 4, commands. Verse 5, reason. So if you want to split it up into one point is the commands, and then the second point is reason.
The reason.
That's fine. That would be fine to do. That's how I did it.
So that can be. I can express that in the outline. So command, command, and then reason, reason. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pastor Tim. Wait, let me
Sure.
stop sharing.
No, that's fine. But make sure your points are directed to your hearers. All right. Especially with this psalm, because it's structured, it's very command focused. That's why my psalm 99, I also made it very directed, right? Extol God for his majestic holiness, exalt. I wasn't just trying to be cute. That was the thrust of the psalm. It was very much directed as a call to respond to God's holiness, and so I made it that way as well.
So basically, in writing down the sermon concept, it should be in a more directive manner.
Yeah.
Just like what you said. Instead of saying appropriate response to the Lord, or I can say an expression of gratefulness to the Lord.
Or yeah,
expressing my gratefulness to the Lord, or how I express my gratefulness to the Lord.
Make it even more directed. Express gratitude to God.
Express gratefulness.
Yeah,
gratitude.
Or some people
okay.
might have an attitude of gratitude, right? That's sort of a catchy way to say it.
Okay. That can be done that way. Thank you very much, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, so for example, on mine here, right? My the author's what and why was exalt God because he is holy. I could have put that in my sermon concept.
Okay.
But I chose to do homage to the holy. I could have said something like God deserves to be exalted because he is holy. That's a perfectly fine statement which summarizes the psalm, but
it could be an indicative.
Yes, it's indicative, not imperative. So
Yeah.
I think for two reasons. One, you want to be imperative or directed
Correct.
in your sermons, because remember, preaching is not just teaching what the passage says, but calling people to respond. And so it's helpful in your sermon title, your sermon main point, your outline to be directed. You don't have to be. Like I said, this would be a perfectly fine sermon concept. It's accurate. It reflects the passage. It includes the key ideas, but I really want to be more directed to, I could say, exalt God, for he is holy. Okay, that would be now more directed to my hearers. I decided to go with do homage to the holy because that's a little bit more memorable with the H word, homage, and then holy. But it's directed. Because, one, I should be thinking...
Okay, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was thinking, if I may use your suggestion a while ago, attitude of gratitude, so that it can be catchy as well.
Yeah, I think that's one approach. I think I said something like give God exuberant worship, grateful worship, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, that's fine.
So it can be memorable.
Yeah, you want it to be memorable, but you still want it to be accurate. So that's the key. Don't go for something that, sounds good if it's not, accurate. So that's always, we want to be careful. So I start with sort of just the basic statement, and then I say, okay, can I make this statement can I make it directed? Okay, yeah, exalt God for he's holy. That's more directed.
Okay.
Now, can I make it a little more memorable and still be accurate? What's another word for exalt? Honor, worship, exalt, homage,
praise.
Lift.
So yeah, praise. So that's the thought process, is I'm trying to put together a more memorable type of main point. Okay, but start with a clear and accurate one. Yeah.
Pastor Ted, sermon concept can be the title in itself.
Yeah.
Or not?
Sure.
So it can be used as a title already in our sermon document.
Yep.
So we have to do the best with this sermon concept.
Yeah, that is a key.
Or it's not necessarily.
5 words or less.
5 to 10 words is fine, but yeah, you can use it as your title, and then that's going to be the thing that you repeat and come back to all throughout your sermon, right? So for example, if I'm preaching point number 1 here, I'll say, now the first way that we do homage to the holy is seen in verses 1 to 3, and that is we do homage to the holy by extolling God for his majestic holiness. And then I'll just keep repeating the main concept all through the sermon. So yeah, it can be your title. That's fine.
Okay. But if you're not using the sermon concept as your title, Pastor Ted, do you really need to make it memorable like that? Because it will not appear in our sermon document. If it will not appear in our sermon document.
You mean your title, you mean?
No, the sermon concept.
Yeah,
because you're saying here. You're saying that we need to make it memorable like that. If it will not appear in our sermon document, do we really need to make it memorable or have this great wording in it?
Yeah, it will appear in your sermon document. It's the main point you're going to be repeating all through the sermon.
Okay.
Right? It's the summary of the point, the main point. So you're going to want to be saying that several times. You're going to want to introduce it in your introduction. You're going to want to repeat it with each outline point. You're going to want to say it again at the end. So yeah, it's going to be all through your sermon. Yeah.
Probably make that as a title already.
Yeah, maybe a better way to say this is not sermon concept, but homiletical idea or sermon proposition, or sermon main point, or there's different ways guys term it, but this is like the main point that you want your people to leave with. That's why you repeat it, because it's the one point that it really is the focus of the whole sermon, the focus of the whole passage. So it's not like a concept, like just something for you to think about. It's actually what it means is it's the main point you express in your message.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Pastor Ted.
Okay, thanks for the question. That's an important thing to note. So that's why we want it to be memorable, because it's something we repeat throughout that we want our people to grab onto. So yeah, if you want to make it your title as well, that's another way for it to be remembered. Okay, good. Any other? Yeah.
Pastor Tim, the directive words that we use, just like an action words or forceful words, based on action words, hence the directive or a forceful words.
Yeah, directed just means that, yeah, you could say forceful, but
Action based on action.
yeah, I think maybe action, calls to action. They'll be in the imperative mood, like a command. But that doesn't have to be like, you better do this. That's not the idea, but it's just make it in the form of a call to action. Okay, like I did: exalt, extol, esteem, yeah, praise, right? Or in Psalm 100 that we just looked at, he wants to make those more directed, like worship, praise,
Thank you, Pastor.
Those kinds of things. Like here, cry out to God for help. That's a call to action. Pray fervently, preach truth. Okay. So you could say, one might say title, a cry for help, a prayer, a response. Okay, that could be the 3 points, but those aren't directed. So these points are okay, they're fine, they're not wrong, but we want to turn those a little bit to our hearers. All right, rather than make it, somebody's cry for help, we should say, when you're discouraged, you need to cry for help. Okay. All right, these are great questions, guys. Any more? Any others?
Pastor Tim,
Yes.
when you do the primary matters, and then my question is the what, why, how. So after you graded the what, the primary matters, and then my question is the how, and then you have suggestion. So when you say like this, this is my suggestion, can we copy that in our outline?
Oh, you mean when I give you feedback on grading, when I grade it?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you think, yeah, if the input that I give you, if you think that best matches what you see the text saying, then yeah, it's okay. And you don't even have to give me credit.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor Tim.
But that's fine. But don't just put it there because that's what I recommend. I want you to think about it as well, and I want you to own it, you to have it as what you believe, not just what I say. But yeah, if you think, after you think about it and study, if you feel that that's a helpful way to say it from what I told you, that's fine. You can use it.
Yeah, okay.
Just send me some of the money that you get after you preach it.
Royalties.
Oh, which
just like the points, Pastor Tim.
yeah, just like the points.
Pastor Ted,
Yes.
about royalties, Pastor Ted. If
Yes.
accidentally we have quoted someone's words, statements like that, are we really liable for plagiarism? Accidentally, without us knowing that he has quoted this statement like that, and we
Let
have
me answer.
actually used it.
Let me jump in. There's with respect to Pastor Tim, there are rules with regard to
Mhm.
copyright and with regard to Creative Commons. So if you use that for teaching and for the general benefit of the public, you don't need to be liable for
Acknowledge.
anything. Yes. However,
You don't need to acknowledge.
it is a practice. It is a common practice to acknowledge, and most especially if there is a specific notation with regard to the work. If you only use a portion less than 10%, it's okay whether you acknowledge or not, although it is recommended that you do acknowledge it. However, regardless whether you use a portion or the entire thing, if you use it for profit, then you are liable for copyright. That's an
How
international
about
law.
if it is really your statement and it just happened that coincidentally, it is
Coincide.
also his statement in his work?
If if there's cause
How
or
could you
merit
prove
for
it?
it to be verified, then it would be verified. However, if it's really out of your own idea, and if it
Yeah, okay.
comes out, there's a rule also that if it's less than 10%, I think 7 to be exact, you won't be liable for anything because it happens. And when, if and whenever it is investigated or verified, they will try to use the entire context of your work in comparison to the context of the
So that the
entire
work.
work of the similar
Okay.
phrase that you apparently use. Yeah.
Okay.
I went through that, and then it's part of my accreditation as a data protection and copyright specialist.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that right, Pastor Tim? Because you're the doctor here.
Well, there's different requirements in different countries, and it depends on if you are presenting a written work. It depends if you're presenting a published work,
Yes.
and then of course it depends if you're making money. So usually a sermon would fall under education. You're
Yes.
providing education, so there's a little more flexibility to what you can use. For us as preachers, it's just a matter of integrity. We want to follow the laws, and that's fine. We should do that. But as far as the sermon's concerned, if you knowingly quote from or use someone else's idea, just give them credit out of integrity.
Yeah.
If
Here's the thing.
if you say something and then someone comes up to you and said, "Did you get that from Pastor so and so?" And well, no, I just thought of it myself. Before the Lord, you haven't done anything wrong. If it's your idea, I had that happen to me one time. Someone came up and accused me of plagiarizing from some commentary I had never seen before. And so they were, and I said, "Look, I just read the passage, and it's very likely, if you get out of all the people that study a passage, they'll come up with similar thoughts. I mean, it's the same Holy Spirit, so obviously it's the same truths that he's presenting. So it's very likely we're going to say something in a similar way that someone else did and not even know. So
yes,
it's just if you know and you use it, you should give credit.
But how about this, Pastor Ted? In this time of pandemic, live streaming is really trendy right now. And I heard of a pastor. Who preaches in a 100% similar material from the Google, and he preached it online.
Yeah.
without acknowledging.
Yeah, I just,
That would be
yeah, that's
bad.
to me that's deceptive. I just,
Yeah.
now if the guy says at the beginning, okay, most of this message I got from, you know, Charles Spurgeon, but I thought, you know, he
No, he did not
expresses
say that.
himself very well, so I thought it'd be a blessing. So most of what I'm going to preach will be borrowed from or connected to what Charles Spurgeon said, and then it's fine. I mean, you,
No, he did not say that. He
yeah,
did not acknowledge the author, but clearly you can say that he copied everything, just everything from the material, and just add something like, you know,
yeah,
to be relevant in our place, to be relevant in this time. But everything in that material are really the points, the wording in it, everything. Because I when I heard him, yeah, I look at the material. Oh, this is the sermon here, and
yeah,
he did not acknowledge what happened. It's
yeah.
really bad when you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just being deceptive, and it's also being lazy. You know, if you're presenting
Correct.
something as your own effort, you know, but it's not yours. One, you're stealing from somebody else if
Correct.
you don't give credit, and two, it's you're not being a diligent student of the word. You're not following Paul's, you know, instruction to be diligent to show yourself approved, and that's not being diligent. So I think
Will there be legal consequences when it comes to that for that
depends
person?
depends on the
If
laws of
the
your.
owner of the material will hear because it's online, will there
It's
be?
possible. It depends on the laws of your country and how those things
No,
are.
because it's online now, so it probably reach your country also. And I guess he's an American preacher also who did that that preaching, but it is
If
preached by
there's
a
no
Filipino.
will, if there's no one, if there are no complainants, then nothing will happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But if there is merit or there are merits, then um, there may be someone who will go
that's it.
after you.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's not a good thing for a pastor to do that.
No, to me the bigger
Definitely.
issue is, again, it's not whether the person's sued or whatever.
Not.
To me the bigger issue is, you know,
He's really
he's being
he's
deceptive and he's
accountable to
being
God.
lazy, and
Yeah, he's
that's not a
accountable to God
that's not a characteristic of a shepherd.
about it.
Is that a sin, Pastor Tim?
Of course, it's a sin. It's a rat. It's a thief.
Stealing.
Yeah,
Stealing.
yeah. If you knowingly are taking something from someone else and presenting it in such a way as if it's yours, yeah, I think that's being deceptive, which is sinful. I think it is stealing, which is also wrong. And I think it's you're not following the command to be diligent, which would also be sinful in my view. And so I think if you give credit, at least you're not being
Nothing. No
deceptive or
problem.
dishonest. But you know, and once in a while, that's fine. Maybe you had a tough week and you couldn't prepare, or maybe just you read a sermon or read something that's just really well done, and you just want to make sure your people hear it. I think I told you guys about, I was at a church one time and the pastor got up and he said, you know, I've been studying about the conflict in the church and I read this really good book, and he gave us the title of the book and the author, and he said, you know, I think I want to summarize the author's points today because I think he really expressed it. So he basically used the outline of the book, but he showed us the book. He told us what he was doing, and he didn't do it a lot. This was, I guess, the first time he'd done it before. So those kinds of situations, it's perfectly fine, in my view. But yeah, if you do that frequently, or if you borrow but you don't
You're
say
being lazy.
anything, or if you take a
You're
lot of
being lazy.
material, you know, we just, you know, remember Paul said the primary quality of a pastor elder is that he's above reproach. And so that's important. A friend of mine who had left our church and they moved to another church, and they start listening to their pastor, and after a couple of years, they said, you know, his sermon sounds familiar, and they figured out that the guy was using sermons from John MacArthur, and
Oh,
basically, like you said, Rex, he was borrowing most of it. He put a few things of his own in it, but it was mostly Pastor MacArthur's.
yeah.
And then they noticed, they looked up another sermon, and it was also from Pastor John. And so they found like a bunch of messages this guy preached that were really from Pastor John, and he never said they were. And so that all of a sudden now, these people saw this man, he didn't have integrity. And so he wasn't
Know
above
how
reproach.
blessed they are. Know how blessed they are with its preaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because really, that's John MacArthur.
Yeah, so
Of course,
the
his
content,
material will bless us, but
yeah, exactly. The
the thing
content
is,
was really good, but
yeah,
he was expressing it as if it was his.
so
And
disgusting.
that was the problem.
Disgusting.
So good, that's a good concern, good issue, Rex, to remind us of.
Thank you, Pastor Ted.
Thank you. Let me, before we close our time here, two things. I want to wish Ramil a happy anniversary. I think I saw
Yeah.
something on Facebook. So, brother, congratulations.
Happy anniversary, Pastor.
Happy anniversary.
Pastor.
If he's still
Happy
there.
anniversary.
The second thing is regarding your sermons. Let me show you what I set up. I talked to Pastor AJ this week about, and he said he would be happy to host some preaching labs with anybody that is able to get to Banawa. He said you could set something up in the parking lot area, so we'll be able to social distance and ventilation, all that stuff. So it'd be physically safe. But he was willing to set up a few times. If you guys, anybody that's able to get there wants to preach their sermon live, he can give you the evaluation directly, just like our regular preaching labs. So that's one option. So what I'm going to do is post something on our Facebook group, just asking who wants to do that, who would like to preach in the preaching lab. The other option is, as I've mentioned to you guys, if you're not able to do that, do the preaching lab with him. I need you to record your message and send it to me. And what I did is I set up a link in Canvas, and I've got that open here. So when you go onto Canvas, go under Assignments, okay, and then go to the upcoming assignments, and you'll see sermon link for your Psalms passage. So just hit that. And then basically, you'll then submit, and I already did one, but submit your assignment and paste your link here of your sermon, okay? And then I can access it. So just paste the
Pastor
link
Ted.
in there and then submit.
Yeah. Pastor Tim,
Yes.
with our group, Brother Will and a lot of guys there with me.
Yeah.
In our place, we have this group Bible study. We answered our assignment in groups. So
Study group.
we have talked about how we do about our sermon, and we have this place in our place suitable for that purpose. So what we're thinking is we will record our preaching ourselves. And if it is Bisaya, is it possible if we can pass it on to Pastor AG, the recorded preaching? And when it is English, we will pass it to you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And or Pastor Tim and Pastor Rex. So perhaps if Pastor AJ would be amenable to go to that place of Pastor Rex's,
Yeah,
then
it's
he can
possible
accommodate
also.
both the English and the
Yeah,
Visayan preachers. Because there's
it's
this
one of us.
really nice place, a worship area of Pastor Rex with a nice background, clear background as well. And at the same time, one of the good things personally I see is that
Nice.
it's not just recorded by one person, but there are a lot of peers present as well. So it will
Yeah,
simulate
classmates.
some of an audience.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if you can work it out with AJ to come to that, I think it's much better to have the live feedback there. So maybe, and then yeah, you can preach in either language, and
Yeah.
AJ can evaluate. So I would ask that maybe Rex, if you could contact AJ and talk to
Yeah.
him about that, see if he's open to that, and
I
then you guys
think
can work
Brother
out a
Will
time.
is more amenable for that.
Yeah,
Brother
that's
Will
fine.
contact Pastor AJ.
Pastor Rex is PowerPointing. Okay, I'll take it. I'll ask Pastor AJ if he can accommodate
Yeah.
us so that
But if not, another choice is that we will record it with ourselves
yes,
and pass it. If it's Bisaya, send it to Pastor AJ, and if it is in English, we will send it to you, Pastor Tim. That was our plan.
Yeah, except I don't want to overload Pastor AJ too much, so I don't want everybody
Yeah.
preaching in Cebuano, because then he's going to have to evaluate 25
Yeah.
sermons. So, my preference is, to try, if you send a link and record it, do it in English.
Yeah, Pastor will preach it in English, I believe.
Yeah, but if you're able to do the preaching labs with AJ, then you have the choice. Whatever language you want to use is fine. So I'm going to send a message to everybody in the group about this, and then you guys can let me know. Anybody who wants to do a preaching lab with AJ, whether it's at Living Word Banawa or whether it's with you at your place, Rex, is fine. You'll just need to work that out with him. And basically you have until the end of November, okay, to get this done. So that's over 3 weeks. Okay. So if you can stay on your assignments, guys, make sure you finish the assignment 5 this week, get your sermon document done next week. Then you'll have, you'll have a couple of weeks to get this done. But if you aren't able to do the preaching labs, then as I said on this thing, just go to assignments on Canvas and then go to the sermon link for your Psalms passage, and you can give me the link there. Okay. So we'll try it this way and see. And like I said, if you record yourself preaching a message to your congregation or Bible study or whatever, then you're allowed to go beyond the 30 minutes. But if you're doing the preaching lab, or if you're doing a special recording for me, then just 30 minutes is the time that you have. Okay. I saw Brother Emil. Are you still there? Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary.
Pastor Tim.
Happy anniversary, Pastor.
Thank you.
Brother
Guys.
Ramil is going to our place. He's probably there already.
Ay, di pa
And
ko
also, his birthday today.
Nagsige ng pangalan na Joseph. Bugaya ko nito.
Birthday today. Birthday ni Eric Cruz.
Ay pa, anto na lang tayo dito sa amo kitang tanan.
No birthday oh.
So
Kikitang tanan.
Are we pushing through tomorrow, Pastor Rex?
Yeah, tomorrow. What's
Okay,
that? Tomorrow
same time
for our
group
assignment.
study assignment. Yes.
Your reservation was it
Yes.
tomorrow?
Yes, yes. Also,
Tomorrow?
it's a it's a
Okay.
separate group, couples group.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Let's go there.
Okay, see you.
All right, guys.
Thank you,
Okay.
Pastor Tim.
Thanks,
Pastor
everybody.
Tim, God bless.
Bye,
God
Pastor
bless.
Tim, thank you
Have a
very
good week.
much.
Let's ask
Yeah.
our anniversary man if he could close us in prayer.
Okay, sige,
Yeah.
let's pray.
All right. Thank you.
Wait lang. Father, we just love